Welcome to the KayaCast, the podcast for cannabis businesses looking to launch, grow, and scale their operations. Each week, we bring you interviews with industry experts and successful retailers, plus practical tips and strategies to help you succeed in the fast-growing cannabis industry.
Hey everyone, in this episode, we are joined by Gahrey, the president of the Long Island Cannabis Coalition. Gahrey talks about his journey as an entrepreneur, what he's learned, as well as an update on what's going on right now in Long Island. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Well, Gahrey, thank you so much for joining us today.
For sure, Tommy. Pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
I know you as the president of the Long Island Cannabis Coalition, but I know that there's so much more to you than being involved in the LICC. So I first want to ask you what was the first business that you started?
Wow. So first business, I guess that would be in the construction industry, right? I kind of got in there just trying things on for size, as an employee, kind of doing different things. And I quickly recognized that I was able to scale certain concepts and really kind of do a lot of these things on my own. So I immediately jumped in, inside of my first year in that space and started my own company. And I was doing construction here in New York just over a decade or so. And, obviously all through Long Island area, including the the boroughs, rather, the 5 boroughs, certainly in the tri-state, and eventually started to fly across the country doing major projects.
So what area of construction that you got into?
Yeah, so it was just all phases of construction, this particular outfit. I was picking up all of the trades at a certain time. And after a while, I was quickly running those larger projects, and I was helping and overseeing a lot of these things. And before I knew it, I just recognized, there was an expertise that I had that a lot of others didn't have while they were on site. And it drove me to just start doing this for myself. And in that way, I was able to kind of get bigger, be very successful, in that space. And it allowed me, like I said, to just be home more often when my wife needed it or when the children needed it, or if I just needed some time for myself.
What was the first mistake that you made in your business career?
Oh my goodness. All of them. So I didn't have, any real mentors in that space. I was kind of just doing what I knew how to do, certainly in a leadership capacity, being a really good student in school. I was able to apply a lot of those lessons, in real life and in these spaces I was working. Being a leader in those spaces, being able to create community and speaking to others and kind of dictating what they should or shouldn't do, or kind of putting things together. I just recognized I was successful in those spaces, but I didn't have any real experience, building this company out. What does that look like when I have to, form these corporate documents and create certain legal protections? I didn't know how to navigate, insurance conversations and, dealing with the municipalities and getting licenses and securities in a bunch of different spaces. So I had to make all of those mistakes, hiring the wrong people for the right job. I had to one, go through the physical mistakes of it and kind of, fail forward. And then 2, really start to identify there are people who have already done this before me. I don't need to struggle the way I'm struggling. I need to find people who have been there, coaches and mentors, people who have done it already, had success. And once I stumbled into that space, that's when I really started to minimize the mistakes I was making. And I was then able to start having a lot more success at a much faster rate.
You've hit something that I feel like is an understatement. Oftentimes business owners, they think about how to solve a problem. Like, how do I solve a problem? What do I do? Instead of thinking who.
Yeah.
It's always who first, then how later. What was that spark in you just having an epiphany? Like, hey, this has been solved before. Who should I bring on my team?
Yeah, well, I think it's just a matter of, like most things, when you first get into it, you throw a lot of effort and energy towards it, right? Because you need to make some headway and make some progress while you're learning and navigating. Once I had a chance to kind of finally see, all right, I'm making progress, I'm doing well, but I'm still not doing as well as I would like, right? it was in those first few years, right? The first 3 to 4 years that I started to get a hang of what I was doing. I was finding some success, and I finally had some room to sit down and think about these problems. And I've always been pretty cerebral in my approach to a lot of things. And in that way, I was able to sit down and think about all the ways in which I was coming up short. And one of the things I've always known is we don't have to invent any wheels. They're already created, right? What we want to do is identify people who have a good, firm understanding of that and can help you manage the space that you're in. Because we're not building anything new. Everything pretty much already exists in this moment. And especially, for me, 25, almost 30 years ago. So at that point in time, it was really just after a few years in, I had some time to think about it. I had some time to review and reflect. And that personal assessment, that's probably the best place, where we start to recognize where we're coming up short, what we're doing well, what we're not. And it was in one of those periods that really led me down the path to finding others who had done it before, who had been successful. And that started that networking that really led to my greatest success.
What was the initial hurdle that you had? Like the first initial hurdle, like the wall, like you hit a wall. What was it
I
as a
think for
first
me, it was,
entrepreneur?
doing all of these things from scratch by myself. I didn't have help. I didn't have a business partner. And I was always worried about, like, man, where is this next job going to come from? Where is this next paycheck going to come from? I thought that was the hardest problem for me to solve. And what I quickly realized was that, no, there are problems all over the place. You just have to make yourself available to them and they'll come find you and create their opportunity. It was in the employees. Finding really good employees was the greatest hurdle and the greatest problem. And when I started to recognize that that was the bigger problem of my problems, that's when I recognized, man, I need to become a better leader in this space. I need to learn how to recognize and hire better people. Where do I go to find them? What are the questions that I need to ask? How do I secure that they're the right people for me in this moment? And when I started to identify that problem there, right? Not so much where's the next project coming from, but how do I get the best people on my team to make sure that we can continue to grow as I bring in more opportunity? That was the one that really started to drive me towards from incremental growth to that exponential growth.
Who was your first key employee that really shaped kind of the business?
I don't know if there was a first. I think it was more just the accumulation of everyone I was dealing with. Oftentimes you kind of hire who's in your immediate area, friends and family, people you know. And even though you get along with them, maybe they're not the best fit for the task at hand. So that's where I recognize, that larger saying, don't mix, family and friends and business and things like that. I started to realize why that's true and all the different ways in which that's true. And it's not always a sinister thing. It's just finding the right people for the right job, right? The best fit for what it is you're doing. And in that way, I think the cumulative experience of hiring people I knew or hiring people that weren't exactly qualified drove me towards finding those people who were better qualified and the exact right person I needed.
I see that a lot in the cannabis industry as well. Let's hire people that we trust versus people that we need for the business.
Definitely. That's just it's a rookie mistake. It's also, it's one of those ways in which we quickly recognize, man, that's not the right person that I need. I certainly like them. I know them, but I need someone who has a particular expertise in this particular area. That's who I need to go find. And this is where we kind of operate in our zones of strength, right? And excellence. Recognize what you do well and handle that. Recognize what you don't do well and find people who can fit that, fill that problem for you. Here is where partnership, right? I always recommend people don't go at it alone. Find someone and the people you need to go at it with. If you can identify a really good partner, and that's what really transformed it for me, right? Once I found good partners in spaces, that's when the time frame in which it took me to overcome things or get past things or to succeed through things, the ability to just kind of ramp from one project into the other or one industry into the next and be successful in all of those spaces. That's where it really started to just take an unbelievable turn because I didn't have to know everything. I was able to rely on my partner who knew certain areas that I wasn't strong in, and I could trust that they were going to do the right thing for me and I would do the right thing for them. And that really started to make the difference.
So it was when you brought in partners on board that can help you really have defined lines of roles and responsibilities so you're not doing it all.
Yeah, definitely. You can't, as an entrepreneur, I think so as a startup business, right? There's so much to be done in the beginning, and not just the beginning, the middle and the end, right? And the same is true inside this cannabis space. So whether you're talking about brand development, finding partners, finding locations, hiring a team, actual operations, running the business, just surviving the early years of emerging market, you want to make sure that with all of those things that have to be done and all of the hats that have to be worn, you're not wearing all of the hats, right? And that's the mistake that most entrepreneurs make. They think there's another problem that has to be done. Let me take off my operations hat and I'm going to put on my salesperson hat. And the sales is done and I'm going to take that off and I'm going to put on my marketing hat. And before you know it, you're wearing all the hats in your business, just running yourself tired and not really creating the effect and the effort, that you really need in those spaces. And it doesn't serve you well, business is complicated, and it's critical that you make sure that you're not doing everything by yourself because you can't do everything by yourself, nor should you.
I know that and I'm hoping, going to be in the cannabis industry very soon.
Yes.
So what is happening in Long Island today?
Yeah. So Long Island, at the end of the day, they are one of the, largest communities, cannabis communities in New York. And they are also one of the most restrictive communities in reference to cannabis retail. We are finding that, almost 90% of all of the municipalities on Long Island have decided to opt out of cannabis retail. We also know that at a constituent level, almost 60 and 70% of their constituents want cannabis retail. They want access, not just for themselves, but for the adult use market that wants access to cannabis. They recognize that community should absolutely have access to what it is they want. And there is this complete disconnect, right, from leadership to their constituents. And oftentimes that's just a matter of, in Long Island, we have leadership that does not represent or reflect the communities that they're responsible for. And in turn, they're making decisions that are not in our best interest, but are more about old and antiquated thoughts, right? And that brings us to our second problem of Long Island, that older, more conservative population on Long Island. They are, their thinking is outdated. Their thinking is antiquated. They're still stuck in a decades-long misinformation and disinformation campaign against this plant and the people who consume it. And that's us, right? So we have to fight back against that at every turn. And oftentimes that's the first conversation that we're having with individuals. Cannabis is a gateway drug. And the science has told us that it's not that. But the local communities still believe that. And our elected officials are part of those communities that still hold on to that wrong thinking, that antiquated thinking. And what we want to do is kind of get rid of that. We want to replace that. We want to let them know that cannabis, if you consider it a gateway drug, it's the gateway away from drugs. It helps in the opioid addiction crisis. It helps wean, crack cocaine and heroin and methamphetamine addicts away from these drugs. If it's a gateway, it's the gateway away from these things. And as we introduce the medical conversation, we can talk about exactly how in our bodies, medicinally, right, there is an endocannabinoid system. There are receptors made for this thing. Oftentimes when I have this conversation, I always try to highlight something that people recognize, because you can only meet them where they are. You can only speak to people in their language. Oftentimes I'll bring up drug tests. People are really familiar with that. I got to pee in a cup. I either pass or fail. What we know about these things is that the synthetic drugs, right? Alcohol, cocaine, heroin, these things get excreted from the body within 3 days. And you have the ability to pass a drug test by waiting a few days because the body pushes that stuff out because it's absolute poison. Whereas cannabis will sit in the body for 30 days, 60 days or longer. And that's because the body absorbs cannabis as soon as it enters and holds on to it as long as it can, because it's medicine for the body. And here's where we recognize the benefits of cannabis and the detriments of all of these synthetic drugs. They are not the same. And you need to understand, as someone who keeps trying to equate them, the absolute difference. And when they start to recognize, man, I never thought about that. That cannabis is actually something that we need, something that our body, that's something that, parts of our body already are ready to receive. I didn't recognize the difference between these synthetic drugs and this natural plant. And maybe there is a conversation that we need to have, because you got to meet people where they are. And in having those conversations, it helps soften the ground, and it helps them get over the fact that reefer madness is not a real thing. It was a disinformation campaign, and you need to stop propagating all of that disinformation and misinformation. And what we're seeing on a positive note here on Long Island is that elder community that we were talking about, they have recently begun to use cannabis as medicine, and they are now willing to explore cannabis as recreation. And in doing so, it just creates the opportunity, right? Like when we identify the problem, we also want to identify the opportunity. And here is where we recognize this very conservative group, this older group, this antiquated thinking, and we find ways to bridge the gap and bring them to where we are today, scientifically, with all these data points, everything that we know now. So those are some of the spaces in which, we struggle in Long Island. And I guess in addition to that, it's the state response, right? The state has not nearly done enough to work through and educate local communities or local municipal leadership. They need to show up. We need the state agencies. We need the governor to do more. We need our legislative body to do more. We need our local municipal leaders, the regulatory agency, the OCM. They need to come out here and do a lot more education work. So we're hoping that with all the work that we continue to do out here, they're going to continue to meet us and help us, cross those bridges, soften the ground, and make it available for the opt-in towns to do more and provide more cannabis retail opportunity, as well as reverse those mindsets in the opted-out towns and get more towns to opt in.
What is the block today? I know that there are 4 towns that have opted in, but it's really Babylon that's rolling.
Mm-hmm.
What is the block with the 3 other townships?
I think for them, it's just a matter of education and awareness and acceptance. There wasn't enough work done in the last 2 years, right, preceding this point, getting them ready and comfortable with the conversation. At the end, in 2021 in December, they were asked to go ahead and make a decision, opt in or opt out, with zero information, zero data points. I have no idea how this is going to affect my community. A lot of them said, no, I'll wait, and they opted out. And we're now, working against all of that. And, it's really just a matter of education. There are a lot of elected officials who are on board with the conversation. Many of them privately and quietly consume cannabis in their own space. Publicly, though, they may not be ready to do that because they recognize they're in a very conservative area. And for an elected official, the most important thing for them is electability. How do I get reelected? Right? They don't want to hurt their chances. So they need to have conversations, and they need organizations like us to help soften the ground, organizations like the state agency to come in and help educate the community, educate them themselves. They are oftentimes part of that misinformed and disinformed community. Once they realize the truth of the conversation, they recognize the benefit to the community, the tax benefit that they are waiting to receive, and they could use in a multitude of ways in their general fund. They start to shift their position and recognize, man, one, this is an adult use community, and we have a 21 and older market who wants it, and they recognize it. They don't push back against that. They recognize then the tax benefit and all the ways in which it could go to beautifying their towns and all the different ways that they can use it in ways that they want. And they recognize, man, that's another positive. And when they see the result, so Strange Stars, for example, here on Long Island, Happy Days here on Long Island, they're open. No nuisance problems, no vandalism, no traffic issue, no crime. They're recognizing it. It's not as scary as what they thought it was. And now that we have these data points, they're slowly shifting their position. But that's the work that has to be done. And that's where the disconnect is and the most resistance lies.
What can somebody do to help the Long Island Cannabis Coalition in the work that you guys do?
So for us, I think it's a matter of showing up. We're all about community. And one of our greatest strengths is our community shows up and shows up often. They are very active and engaged. And when it's time to do something, they're there doing the work. When it's time to help others, they are there helping others. Be seen or opening up or being visible or educating others. Join us, right? First and foremost, let's break bread and create bonds that allow us to move forward and create the successful cannabis program and the successful cannabis industry that we want to see here in Long Island and in New York. So go to our website, longislandcc.org. That's going to allow you to join our membership. And then once you join a membership, then we can communicate with you and let you know all of the amazing things that we're doing on the island, all of the different events, dates, times, opportunities, because we cover a lot of ground. We educate the community, we educate municipal leaders, we create events that bring the public and the cannabis business community together, because at the end of the day, this is supposed to be fun and we should be having some fun while we do it. Show up, join our membership, and in there you can then start to find ways to give back and volunteer time and be more impactful in your own communities, as well as highlighting your business inside of this growing community.
Gahrey, I want to thank you so much for leading the charge. How can our listeners find you?
Yeah. So from, me personally, you can find me in the social media space at Gahrey Ovalle, Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, right? LinkedIn as well. And like I said, the Long Island Cannabis Coalition, longislandcc.org is our website. You can sign up there. You can become a member, and then you'll be actively communicating with us, and we can actively let you know when we're hosting these events. We can get together and build that larger community that's going to make the difference that we all want to see.
Gahrey, thank you so much for joining us today. We have to have you back. The next time we have you back, we're a few steps closer to opening.
Yep, absolutely. That's what we're all hoping, right? From your words to God's ears. Thank you very much, Tommy. I do appreciate it.
Hey guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode. Gahrey made a really good point. If you're going through a problem today, you're not alone. Look internally and see if your team can help you. And if nobody on your team has experience or the skill set, then look externally. Somebody in this world has solved the problem you're going through. You just have to find them. It's really the who in this situation. Never go through a problem yourself. It takes forever. You're going through the long route, and it's just better to get help. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. We'll talk soon.
Thanks for listening to the KayaCast podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast in your favorite podcast app, or visit our website to learn more about our guests and to access the full archive of episodes from the show. Join us next time as we continue to explore the world of cannabis and help you grow, launch, and scale your business.